One of the reasons I decided to do this report into the transparency of the Council, which is the group which comprises the ministers from all of the member states who agree on legislation along with the Parliament, is partly out of this the blame Brussels culture, that many people don't realise that it's their own member states, their very own ministers, democratically elected by themselves, that are agreeing this legislation in Brussels. The Parliament in Europe is very transparent. Individual member state parliaments can be transparent, but the Council itself isn't very transparent. And so at the end we don't always know, well, what position did a member state take, what amendments were tabled, any of that. And people who are interested in a particular piece of legislation, it's very difficult for them to follow it. So let's say people in Ireland are particularly interested in a piece of environmental legislation. They're trying to find out, well, what position did Ireland take, or France? What are the arguments? What's the debate? And how can we get involved, which is their democratic right to do. But because it lacks transparency, and because member state positions very often aren't recorded, then people get frustrated. They can't get involved, and therefore the treaty right they have to engage in the democratic process of the EU, and to hold both the EU itself, the EU institutions and their own member states to account, that piece is missing, and that's why I thought it's very important to do this particular investigation. In terms of transparency and accountability within Ireland itself, actually Ireland ranks very high. We tend to talk down our own government sometimes and our own member states, but when I look at the other member states in relation to transparency, freedom of information, ethics, lobbying. For example, we have a lobbying register now, which an awful lot of member states don't do. Ireland actually scores very high. And in fact, a lot of member states are looking to see what Ireland has done, particularly in this area of lobbying transparency, and taking lessons from that. Now, in relation to its position within the Council, well, that's something they're going to have to discuss amongst themselves and with the other member states. And we'll see what happens. I would hope, given the very good track record that Ireland has in relation to transparency legislation and matters like that, and accountability in Ireland, that will transfer onto the bigger European stage, and that they will support the recommendations and the suggestions that I've made in this report. I think the lesson from this is that member states, when it comes to decrying this blame Brussels culture, they can't have it both ways. They can't, on the one hand, say it isn't fair and decry the increase in populism, which is partly, generated by this blame Brussels culture, and then on the other hand, as we would say in Ireland, keep their hands across their homework and not let us see what's happening. So that, if they want to defend themselves against accusations of a lack of democracy or accountability within the EU institutions, well, they have to step up to the plate, and they have to make their processes more open. Now, I'm not naive. I can understand why this sort of diplomatic impulse to keep everything under the radar until you get everything agreed. I can understand that impulse, because it's very difficult to get 28 member states, not in relation to everything, but in relation to some matters, to agree. So they would like to do it sort of secretly, so that at the end they can produce something when there is consensus and there isn't a fuss made. But they have to balance the benefits of that with the risk, which we've all seen the outcomes of over the last few years, in terms of this increasing Euroscepticism, not just Euroscepticism, but this anti-European feeling and these accusations of a lack of democratic accountability. So, they have to be brave, I think, and they have to reflect, but they also have to give credit to the political maturity of citizens as well. Obviously, maybe Ireland doesn't want to see they had a row with France about something, or France doesn't want maybe their own people to see, how they amended their initial position as well. But that is the nature of democracy. There has to be debate, and they have to defend it. But also people have a right under the treaty to get involved. And if they see something happening that they want to either support or argue against, they have to be given that opportunity, because that is democracy. So you can't have, on the one hand, member states being very open in terms of their own audience with their own, member state parliament, committees, whatever, being very open about what they do, and then go to Europe and be afraid, reluctant to show the democratic process actually working very well. think the changing, the responsibility for changing the Brussels culture doesn't just lie in Brussels. I think it lies with member state parliaments. I think it lies with member state media as well. I think Brexit has made the whole European scene a lot more interesting, a lot more dramatic, a lot more human, if you like, because it has been, it has captured the imagination of so many people for very obvious reasons. But up to that, I think Brussels is seen as far away. The legislative process is difficult. It can be complex, so people ignore it. But if they ignore it, that means that they don't have the possibility of trying to change it, trying to engage with it. I certainly think that member state parliaments have a big role to play, but I think individuals themselves also have to, do their own piece of lobbying in relation to trying and making this more transparent. I mean, we did have a public consultation in relation to this, and there was quite a lot of engagement around that. And I think coming up to 2019, when we have, European Parliament elections, we have a new commission, and with various ideas being tossed out in relation to the future of Europe, and this being actively debated, that this is an opportunity for citizens to get involved. And there are plenty of opportunities for them to do it, and I'm hoping that my investigation, with hopefully a good response from the Council, to make this process more accessible and more accountable, that'll play its own role in relation to this debate.